Hello, and welcome to Finale to Dorico, Conquering the Transition. My name is Jason Loffredo, and I'll be your guide today as we start to explore Dorico's Engrave Mode. In part 1 today, I'm going to give you an overview of the different tools in Engrave Mode and how they may or may not differ to similar functions in Finale. So you can see I'm in Dorico, and currently I'm in Write Mode, but we know that Engrave Mode is the third mode, so we can get there by pressing Command 3 or Control 3 on Windows. Now, Engrave Mode has two sides to it. There's the left panel with a bunch of tools here, and then the right panel with pages and page templates. In this video, I'm really going to explore the left panel here with the 5 subtools. Actually, this first button just opens and closes the panel, but below that are the 5 subtools. This is the graphic editing tool, this is the frames tool, this is the staff spacing tool, the note spacing, and the graphic slices tool. We're going to deal with all 5 of these as best we can today. In the right side of the page in Engrave Mode, you have this section for pages, and this is a literal representation of the pages in the particular layout that you're looking at. And you can see there's 18 pages, and it will show you the left and right pages, etc. There's certain things you can do here. You can change the page numbers, you can add blank pages, a whole bunch of different things. Below that, we have a set of page templates and flow headings and page template sets. This is sort of where you're going to be designing the titles on the page. And this is very unique to Dorico. Finale doesn't do anything like this, so it is a little bit complex and really flexible, but also very powerful. And it really does deserve its own video. So that's going to be the second part of the Engrave Mode videos, is going to be all about page templates, and I'm even going to show you some things about paragraph styles, which is related to that as well. So I'll get to this in the second video. In this first video, we're mostly dealing with the stuff on the left-hand side here, starting with the graphic editing tool. Now, the graphic editing tool is basically where we're going to do the majority of the editing on individual elements in the score, whether it be a slur or a text marking or a time signature or anything else, right? We can do a lot of different functions there. But before we do anything, let me just remind you, if we open the bottom panel, the properties panel, Command 8 to do that, I do want to make you aware again of this option here, set local properties locally or globally. By default, Dorico will start with locally selected. And what this means is that when you make changes to the layout that you're looking at, those changes are only going to apply locally to the layout that you're currently viewing, in this case, the full score. But if you set it to globally, then any change you made here will also be filtered to the other layouts. Now, it's my opinion that if you're working on the score, you probably should start with this set local properties set to globally, because chances are the changes that you make in Engrave Mode to the score, you're going to want to have in the other layouts, right? Once you go into the parts themselves and you're happy with the score, but you don't want to change anything in the score, then you can switch this over to locally, so that the changes that you make in the individual parts will only apply to those individual parts. But it's really important to make sure that this is checked the way that you want it first. And even if this is closed, that is set. So when you start moving things around, it'll be set globally or locally, just like that. So I can't emphasize that enough. Just make sure that you have that set the way you want to start. Now, with the graphic editing tool, this is where we can do a bunch of stuff. And as you select things, you can certainly drag things around if you need to offset them just a little bit. It's just as simple as grabbing it and dragging it. You can also nudge items by holding down the Option key and using the arrow keys on your computer keyboard. That will nudge it up, down, left, or right. If you hold down Option and Shift, it will nudge by a little bit more. Option Command will nudge by a little bit more than that. So there's like 3 levels of being able to nudge. And as I mentioned in a previous video, when you're working in Engrave Mode, what you're doing when you move these items is you're changing the offset from the default position. And you can still see the attachment point here. Hopefully you can see that. That red dotted line going to that first beat, meaning that this legato marking, no matter where I drag it, is always going to be attached to that 16th rest there. When you're in Write Mode, it's different. Like, you can't actually change the offsets. What you can do is change where it's attached. So you can see I can kind of move left and right, and it will jump to those particular spots, but it's still the default position relative to that new attachment point, right? In Engrave Mode, you can actually offset the values a little bit from the default positioning. Now, I should mention that the default position that these take are defined by either the engraving options or, in some cases, in the paragraph styles. This is a text item, so this happens to be in the paragraph styles. If I go into paragraph styles and look at default text, which is what that is, you can scroll down a little bit and you can see some options for placement. It's above, it's 3 spaces above the staff. It is avoiding collisions. There's no horizontal offset, right? This is the place where the initial default offsets are set relative to the attachment point, right? When you move it in Engrave mode, you're moving it in addition to those offsets, if that makes sense. And what I want to point out about this is that when you do move them, if you pull up the Properties panel, Command 8, you'll see that in the first section where it says Common, you have this option here, Offset, and you'll see that it's checked, or the check mark is turned on, and you have different offset values. And you can see as I'm dragging it, the offset of the X and Y will change. And it's same thing if you nudge it with the arrow keys, the offset will change, right? You can also use the X and Y offsets to make it move. So these are basically linked together. Wherever you move it, you're going to see the resulting X and Y offsets, right? This also means that if you ever want to reset the position, one thing that you can do is just go over here and turn off the offset, and then it goes back to its original position. When you turn it back on again, it will zero out, so it will still be there. But again, once you do this, these X and Y offsets will fill in a value. There's another way to reset it. If you have it selected, go to the Edit menu, and there's this option here, Reset Position. I use this so much that I actually programmed a shortcut for myself, Shift Delete. That is not pre-programmed in Dorico, but this is something that I added. But that reset position will bring it back to the original offset, and it will turn off the offset property here. And so while we're in the Properties panel, just notice all the other options, right? This is the common stuff where you have the offsets. You can suppress playback and do things with scaling it if you want it to be smaller or whatever. But there's also specific things for text. You can deal with the position, whether it be above or below. You can do things like erase the background, add a border. You can change the border style, right? There's a lot of things related to the text that you can do in the Properties panel. And there's things that you can do to other items depending on what you have clicked. The properties will change. So now I've clicked a dynamic and you see slightly different properties for that particular dynamic. You still have your offsets, but you have other things where you can like add a suffix if you want to do SUB period. You could do that here to get your P subito, things with text alignment, all kinds of things. And then if you select something else like a slur, you're going to have options that are relative to the slur in terms of direction. You can even create S slurs here. Again, you can still do the offsets, and with the slurs, now you get your 5 handles. You're probably familiar with how this works in Finale. It's very similar. You can kind of drag those handles around, and when you do that, you're actually changing the slur handle offsets over here, which is another thing that you can do. Now, for something like this, actually using the reset position doesn't do anything because you're not changing the position, you're changing the design. So there is another option here, reset appearance, which will reset that back to 0 and turn off all of these handle offsets as well. There's other things you can do, like with style, it can be solid or dashed or a whole bunch of different things in the Properties panels. And there's different options for different items. If you select a note, it's a whole other list of properties that you can add to this, including, jazz articulations, all kinds of things with fingerings and note spacings and bracketed notes and things like that. There's just a lot here. It's worth kind of looking through at some point to see what's available for each type of item, right? And again, the idea is all the same. When you select something and there's nothing checked in the properties, it means that it's basically using all of the parameters from either the paragraph styles or the engraving options or the layout options or the notation options. However you have it set, that's the way it is until you start making these individual changes. You're effectively overriding the default look of things when you make changes to the properties panels like that. And it really should just re-emphasize the fact that if you do want to change the overall look of your score, it's best to start in the engraving options or the notation options or the layout options, depending on what you're looking to do. There are a lot of things that can be changed in terms of positioning, in terms of how they're designed, in terms of, there's different ways you can design the slurs in here with different values and everything. I mean, there's a lot here I'm not going to get too much into, just to say that you should look in these options first to get the global setting as close as you can get it to how you want it to look. And then when you still need to make minute changes, then you can do it in Engrave Mode. The other thing you're going to do in this main graphic editing tool is you're going to format the systems. And you'll note that on the left side here, you have some options, actually including bracketing, which is something you can also do in Engrave Mode. And just to show you real quick how to do this, just select and then command select something else, and you can just simply add a bracket like that if you need to do that. So you can do some custom bracketing as well in this tool. But the rest of this above this is related to formatting systems and formatting music frames and stuff like that, which I'll show you how to do right now. Let me just go back and turn the signposts on, and I'm going to move over to the second movement. Now you can see that I've got some system break signposts here already, meaning I've already done some editing in terms of how the casting off is. But as we get to the third page of the second movement, I've stopped doing that just so I can show you how this works. So in order to create a system break, what you're going to do is select something in the bar where you want it. Like if I wanted to break right here instead of right here where Dorico's doing it naturally, I can select anything and use this button here, Create System Break, which has the shortcut Shift S. And you'll see that that bar now moves down to the second system, and you get the System Break signpost. If you just select the signpost and delete it, it will go away and it will go back to the way it is. The other thing that you should know, in Dorico, unlike Finale, you can actually select the bar line. So you see that you can actually select that and it will turn orange, and Shift S will do the same thing. A lot of times I find it actually easier to select the bar line than trying to select something in the measure. There's also another function here called Make Into System, and the way that this works is if you need to squeeze something onto a system, like you need this bar to squeeze into this system, again, just select something here and select something in the first measure and do Make Into System, and you'll see that it will squeeze that bar here onto this system. And again, you can just undo that. The other thing that you can do, and was actually a nifty addition that they added sort of at the behest of a lot of Finale users, is that they've created a shortcut which allows you to move a bar downwards or upwards a system. And it's not up and down like it is in Finale. Actually, let me just, I'm sure you're familiar with that. You just kind of select a bar and you can press the down arrow or press the up arrow to move it. It works the same way, it's just a different keystroke. In Dorico, it's the period key goes down and the comma key goes up. So, and again, you can select anything in the measure, it doesn't matter. The rest there, period, will move it down or move it back up. One thing that I want to mention, let me just undo a bunch of things here to get back to where we started. When you make the system breaks in certain ways, so if I actually select this one and press the period key, what you're doing is you're actually creating a system break here and a system break here. So it's kind of locking these two systems. You just need to be careful about this, because sometimes when you do it this way, if you were to delete this system break but not this one, watch what happens. Yeah, you get this kind of disaster and it looks like a mess, and you might be panicking and wondering what in the world happened. Well, it has to do with a specific property of the system break. And if you select the system break, there are properties for the system break. And it's this one in particular called Wait for Next System Break. And what that means is that it's literally waiting for the next system break. Otherwise, it's going to pile on every single bar that it can all the way to the end of the flow before it breaks the system. So because there's no system break after this one, this is what happens. But if you just uncheck that, it will get fixed. I just mentioned this because it is something that can happen depending on how you create these system breaks. So if you do see that, that's the solution. Just open the properties panel and make sure that this wait for next system break is turned off. There are some legitimate reasons why this gets turned on and off, but a lot of the times it might not be clear to you why that happened. If it does, just turn off that particular property. There's also this other option called Lock System. So if you select something here, and let's say select something all the way down in the bottom system here and press Lock Systems, all that does is actually just put system breaks everywhere so that it stays exactly as it does. Could be handy if you're just happy with the way it is and you don't want to change anything. The other thing that we can do is what's called frame breaks, and they work sort of the same way. And the frame breaks you can think of as page breaks, right? In Finale, you're probably familiar. You go into the page layout tool and you can right-click here and choose Insert Page Break, and that system will now be forced onto the second page and a gap will be left at the bottom of the first page, right? We have the similar function in Dorico, but instead of calling it a page break, they call it a frame break. Now, it's called a frame break for a specific reason. There are music frames on every page. If you can kind of see it, it's this blue box here that's surrounding all of the music. That's what Dorico calls a music frame. What you're doing is you're breaking in the frame, and it's possible to have multiple frames on the page. The general way that Dorico is set up is that there's one frame per page. So effectively, most of the time, a frame break is a page break. It's just that occasionally, if you have more frames on the page, a frame break doesn't necessarily mean a page break. So that's why they're called frame breaks, although for all intents and purposes, it actually is a page break. And it works the same way. You just select something, like if I select this bar line and you do create frame break, which has the handy shortcut Shift F. And you'll see that that next bar will get onto the next page. There'll be an empty space here, and you'll have a frame break signpost instead of a system break signpost. And all the other things work the same way. You can force things into a frame by selecting a couple things and do make into frame. Again, you can lock the frames if you have a bunch of things selected. I won't demonstrate that. I think you probably get the idea of that. And then below that, you have two options for locking layout and resetting layout. So if you have it set, it's exactly the way you want it. Maybe Dorico has cast it off exactly the way you want it and you don't want it to change. Just press the lock layout button and everything will lock down. Everything will get either a system break or a frame break at the top of the page. So that would be the lock layout. Also, you can do the reset layout, and this will literally delete every system and every frame break in the layout. So that would be the reset layout. The other way to do that actually is to select a system break or a frame break. Command Shift A will select all of the rest of the system breaks and frame breaks, and then just press delete to delete them all at once. It does the same exact thing whether you reset or select all and delete. So let's talk about the second tool here, which is the frames tool. And there are three different types of frames. There are music frames, which is on this page are the blue boxes, right? That's where the music goes, and there's a whole bunch of things with frame chains and all kinds of stuff. You can put different flows and different players in the frames depending on how you want to set it up. It is a little bit complex. I'm not going to get too much into that here, but this system does allow for things like setting up piano forehand, where you have the secundo part on the left page and the left page and the primo part on the right page. These frame chains allow you to do that nice and easily, but you just have to set it up in a certain way. But anyway, you can insert more than one music frame. This is good for like indexes if you want to just show the first couple measures of each movement or something like that in the preamble. You can have multiple frames on the page, music frames. You can have insert text frames, and the text frames are the green frames. This is where all of the titles and stuff like that are going to go, and you can also insert graphic frames as well. And the way these work is you just select what you want and then just sort of draw out the rectangle, and you'll see a brand new green music frame there, and you can double click in there and type whatever you want, and you have a new text block. It's not that dissimilar to Finale, where you're just sort of adding text to the page, except it is really very different. This text now only exists in the score. This is very different than Finale, because you know if you put a text on the page in Finale, it's going to show up in the score and it's going to show up on every single linked part. That's not the case in Dorico. This text frame only appears in the full score. And what's relevant here is that on the right-hand side, when you add a frame that's not part of the default template, you get this icon here on the right. You get this little red triangle. This is indicating that there's now a page override to this first page. Normally, when you select a page here, one of these page templates is going to be highlighted. In this case, the default template, which is page 2 to the end. But now that this has an override, you select that, and you can see that it's basically telling you it's not using one of these templates. It's using a custom page setup that doesn't follow the template. This is important because if you ever change the page templates after this point, those changes are not going to be applied to this page, because this page override is saying, no, this page is now set because you added this custom item here. So, and this is why when we design titles in Dorico, it's really important to actually do the title design in the page templates, which is what I'm going to show you in the next video, not to design them directly on the page in Engrave Mode like this, because this is not going to show up everywhere that you want it to show up. If you ever get these red triangles and you don't need them, you can just right click and choose remove page overrides, and that will go away. It will delete that text frame, and now you'll see that that page 1 is using the first page template as it should. So when you're using Engrave Mode, if you go and use these frames for anything, just realize that it's for a very specific purpose. It's just to put a very specific instruction on a single page in that layout. Don't use this to create the titles. Use the page templates, which I'll get to in the next video. The third tool here is the staff spacing tool, and when you select that tool, you get a bunch of different things on the screen. Mostly these blue square boxes and this blue line over here indicating the top of the systems, and this is where you can make adjustments. Now, it's worth pointing out that Dorico will make vertical spacing adjustments automatically so that there's very few collisions. In fact, you can kind of look through. I've made no adjustments vertically to this particular piece right now, and there are very few, if any, collisions anywhere. In fact, I can't even see one immediately. There might be one somewhere, but I don't see it. So Dorico does a really incredible job of avoiding the collisions, vertically speaking, right? But if you ever need to tweak, if you ever want to tweak just a little bit, you can do that with this tool. And the way that this tool works is that you select the tool and then you just grab a handle and you can just drag, and that will drag up or down. You can also nudge with the option keys and the up and down arrow, or option shift will nudge a little bit farther, or option command will nudge even farther. So again, 3 levels of nudging. And when you do that, note that the box now turns red. This is telling you that this position is a custom position relative to the way that Dorico normally would have put it by default based on the parameters in the layout options. If you select this bigger box, this will move the entire system. And there's one other thing you can do that's might be interesting to know, is that if you hold down option and drag something, it will sort of accordion collapse everything below it. It doesn't work the other way though. So if you go upwards, it's not accordion expanding, it's still accordion collapsing what's above it. So that's holding down option if you need to do that. The other thing that you can do is you'll see the millimeter options here. You can actually double click in there and change these by number. So if you want that to be 13 millimeters or 132 millimeters, as I just did accidentally. Let's do that again. 13 millimeters. You can set that to 13 millimeters. So you can actually double click in these boxes to get more precise measurements if you really want to. Once these are red, in order to have them return to their default state, just select the box and press delete, and it will go back to where it is and it will turn blue again. Now, one thing is that you can't, it's hard to select like one staff on multiple pages. I mean, you can do it if you select the viola there and then command select and then command select, but there's no way to actually like select all of the viola line like that. But Dorico does have an interesting feature here. If you make some changes and you set this up the way that you want it, or if you want to just completely even out the spacing so that it's all 13 millimeters or whatever it is, you can do that. And then what's nice is that Dorico has this function in the Engrave mode in staff spacing called copy staff spacing. And what this will do is you can tell it to copy from, let's say, page 2 in this instance. You can copy to page 3 to page 3 if you just want it on a single page, or all the way to page 18 if you want it to copy all the way down the rest of the layout. So this way you can get completely consistent staff spacing this way if you just set it up the way that you want on one page and copy it to the rest of them. And when you do that, you'll see that every single staff has the same value, 10 millimeters, 15.9, 11.1, etc. So that's one way to make the staff spacing completely uniform across the file, which would, again, kind of go against what Dorico wants to do in terms of the automatic collision. But, there may be occasions where that could be handy. And just to mention, I've been talking about the automatic collision that Dorico has. I just want to show you where this is. If you go to the layout option, so this is going to be layout specific for the full score I'm looking at right now. If you go to vertical spacing, there's a whole bunch of options for, the staff to staff spacing, the staff group to staff group to staff group, etc. There's a whole bunch of options here for how they're spaced apart. And these are the minimum gaps, which means that there's at least this many spaces, but there could be more depending on, how much material is there, what's below and above the staff. There's also options here for how much collision avoidance is happening happening. In this case, it's 2 spaces. You can even turn that off completely, so it's not doing that at all. There's a bunch of other options here that you can set. And I really highly recommend you check out a John Barron video that I will link in the description that kind of goes through this a little bit more in depth and sort of explains how this works. But what I want to say is that you really should check out these options and set these options first to get it to get the vertical spacing in your score as close as you can to the way you want it to be before you start making vertical adjustments. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern here, right? Set the global settings first and then go to these tools and make the changes that you want, because that's just going to save you a lot of time instead of trying to make 1,000 changes to the vertical spacing. Look at the layout options and set it there first before you do that, right? The fourth tool here is the note spacing tool, and when you go to this tool, you get a bunch of other different types of blue rectangular handles, and you'll get blue handles at every single position where there's an event. So if it's a note or a rest or a bar line, you'll get a blue handle. And what you can do with these handles is move them, but you can't drag them, unfortunately. I don't know why you can't drag them, but you can't drag them. You have to nudge them. And it's the same commands, Option right and left, to expand or contract the spacing, or Option Shift right and left will do by a little more, Option Command will do by even a little more, right? And you can see that what's happening is I'm expanding the spacing or I'm contracting the spacing. And when you do that, again, it turns red. And again, if you just select the red box and delete it, it will turn blue. Now, one thing I want to mention is that the blue square boxes, right? If I go over to Finale, you may be familiar with how the measure tool works. So if you select the measure tool and then select the bottom handle there, you'll get this weird grid, and this is going to allow you to move the stack of notes, and this will move all of the notes in the vertical stack all at once, right? This is the same thing as moving these square blue handles. It does the same thing. It moves the entire stack of notes. However, when you select a square handle, what you'll note if you zoom in here is that when you have that selected, then there's new handles that are circular that appear in certain places. These circular handles will allow you to move the note independently of the entire stack. So if I select that blue circle there and move that to the right, you'll see that it will move away from the stack and it will no longer be aligned with the rest of the notes. This is similar to how Finale functions with the special tools. The very first tool here, the note position tool. In this case, you can go in here and just move that quarter note and it will be, off of the stack. So, that's the equivalent there. So in the note spacing tool, you have either the square handles will move the entire stack or the circular handles will move the individual note on that particular staff. The actual note spacing in Dorico, which by the way is really beautiful. It's one of the things that I love about Dorico is how well it handles note spacing, but there are some controls for that in the layout options. Note spacing is actually layout specific, so it can be different between different layouts, and there's this whole section for it here on the left for note spacing, and you can do things with spacing ratios, the default space, the minimum space, etc. There's a few options that you can actually set here if you want. And you have some granular control as well. If you select an item, let's say here, you select that note there. Let me zoom in here and just actually select the note itself. In the engraving menu, you have note spacing change, which allows you to make some changes relative to those layout option changes. And these are sort of the same exact items, except that you can make a specific change to the default space for the quarter note for et cetera to make it a little wider. And when you do that, the spacing will get a little bit wider, and you'll also get a signpost for a note spacing change. You can then reset it later if you want. So there is some more flexibility with how the note spacing happens. And again, these signposts can simply be deleted if needed. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility with the note spacing and with the note spacing tool. Although honestly, Dorico does such an incredible job with the note spacing, I am hardly ever using this tool, to be completely honest. And then finally, the fifth tool here is called the Graphic Slices tool. And Finale has something similar in the graphic tool. Some of you may not even be completely aware of it, but you can actually double click out a sort of box. And with that box, you can go to the graphics menu and export the selection, and it will allow you to export a PNG or any of these other formats and it'll let you save it somewhere. You can change the resolution, allow for transparency, etc. This will actually create a graphic that's basically in that box. So that's how you would do it in Finale. It's actually somewhat similar in Dorico, except for the fact that you can do more of them. So with that tool selected, press the Create Slice button, and then again, just draw out, you don't have to double click, just single click and draw out the box, and you'll get a little red box, and you've just created a graphic slice. And of course, you can edit this if you didn't quite get it right. These can be renamed, so I can call this Viola measures 1 to 2. And then what's nice is that you can create more. So if I can press it again, and I can go over here, and I can say, let's do one for piano measure 3, and get that a little bit more where I need it, and rename this piano measure 3. And you can create as many of these as you want, and ultimately you can select one or select multiples, decide what format you want to export in, let's say PNG, mono, and 1200 DPI. You can change where it goes, and then just press the export selected button, and it will export whatever graphic slices you have selected up here. So there's a lot more flexibility in Dorico in terms of this, and it's pretty easy for them to be created, and they're kind of saved. I mean, obviously these red boxes won't print or anything, but they will always be there later if you need to export them again. And of course, you can just select them and press the trash can to delete them. All right, so that's all of the 5 tools in Engrave Mode. Hopefully this has helped. Again, the next video is all going to be about the page templates and designing the titles, which I think is a really important thing because it is a very unique system, very powerful and flexible system, but it's definitely unique, and it's something that's completely different than Finale. So I think it's worth taking the time to show you how to do that so you can get your titles the way you want. All right, so thanks for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will see you soon on the next one.